So at this year's NAOM, North American Open Masters, we had a different aerial rescue than what you'll normally see, and I think it was a great learning experience for everyone involved. This is, all of the climbers were sequestered. They were on the other side of the street, so they couldn't see and hear the actual other climbers going through the rescue. And I think everybody was very good about not sharing what their experience was, because if they did, it would ruin the experience for the climbers. But as you can see, the entire tree was behind this beautiful artwork and tarp. And Rich Hattier was the brainchild behind the scenario. I was fortunate to be able to work with Rich, setting it all up and having a little bit of input. But as we were doing it, it became evident to me that I would probably be best served as being the dummy. So not to be the actual dummy, I got to be the voice of the dummy, which was a lot of fun because I was up there trying to hide between a couple little branches, but be the voice of an actual victim and make this probably the first time a lot of guys have actually been to aerial rescue and had a dummy that would actually respond and interact with the climber. And it was very interesting to observe how the climbers dealt with this, because you could tell a lot of them were used to coming in the ring and doing their deal and not having to listen to a victim. But in reality, you're never going to have that like you do in a competition. So this was as much a learning opportunity as it was the opportunity for climbers to demonstrate their abilities. So I'm going to go through some of the things we learned and explain the scenario, and hopefully everyone can learn a little bit like the rest of us did. So in setting this up, I'll try to show you where everything was. Alright, to explain the scenario, first of all, I'll show you where everything is. This right here is the tail of the climbing line. If you look right here, and I know I'm covering it up, so I'll erase all this so you can look at it again. That is the anchor, the canopy or the cinched crown anchor, whatever you want to call it, is what broke out for the climber. His climbing line then goes up where it caught on part of the tree structure. It came through this crotch and then dropped down, and it was attached to the climber with the tail going to the ground. So that was his primary support point. Then, and it's again difficult to see from here, but with a little bit of observation, the climbers could see it. But over here, you can see right here, that is the tail of his secondary or traverse system that he set up. It didn't go all the way to the ground. It went up. You could see where it was attached to the climber. And then it also went up and caught up in a branch union, and then went over where, it's a little off screen, but you could see where there was a hook attached to a branch union. And so this part that was on the hook, of course, is not life support. And the life support was broken out. So he's hanging from a non-life support attachment. What I would say, as soon as the climber came into the ring, I would be in a panic and explain to the climber that I had fallen through the tree. I heard a loud crack. I had bought this thing on eBay and got it at a discount, and saw some really cool videos on YouTube on how to do these traverses. And so I was practicing this traverse when the next thing I know, I went crashing through the tree and got banged up pretty bad, but I was conscious, but quite hurt, and more than anything else, very scared. And I would express that I was afraid that the thing I was hanging on, and I never said hook or anything, I was careful not to say that, but I would explain that the thing I was hanging on, I could feel it slipping, and I was fearful that it was going to come loose and I would fall to my death. So it was interesting because a lot of the climbers would enter the ring, and first thing they would do is they would talk to the ground personnel, and ground personnel would explain that there'd been an accident. So they would start to talk to me, and they'd ask me questions. And like I just explained, I'd go through that scenario best way I could, but oftentimes I would be interrupted because it takes time to listen to me explain that I heard a crack and I fell through the tree and blah blah blah. And many times the guys would interrupt me, and right away, before I had a chance to explain about the problem that I was hanging on and everything else, they would start doing their site analysis and the tree analysis and checking for electrical and bees and hazards in the trees and all those things. And there was a couple times guys would just basically tell me to be quiet, and so I would be quiet, and I said, okay, well, I'll just sit here and wiggle my toes. And then I would start complaining about, I think I felt this thing slip again and I'm going to fall out the tree and I'm quite scared, and we would have a little bit of drama with that, but it was really interesting to see how certain climbers would handle the scenario. So I'm going to erase these lines and give you a chance to just look at it without the lines and kind of get a picture. There is some other gear up there. You'll see right up here, this big round thing. That was the auto belay that Chris has. So we had the dummy on an auto belay, and then I would be standing offside over here in these branches, trying to stay as invisible as I could, but you know, people could see me standing up there. But I would be up there to be the part of the tree tech and also be the voice of the dummy. So looking a little closer, right here you can see where the dummy is, and there is a perfect branch union right here that's 35 feet, and pretty easy, well, a good target to hit with your throw line. And then this is the auto belay right there, and there was a little bit of rigging up there for the haul back, but that was fairly obvious. But right here is also a perfect place to set a sling, where you could set your own line, and you can see that the dummy's hanging here on this line that is not suitable for life support and doesn't even go to the ground yet. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but so many times people would just not go for this branch union, so just point that out for a second. And this is Chris doing a run through, but you can see where he's setting the sling just above that dummy. And as far as throwing up there next to the dummy, it was a good 6 feet away. Not too difficult to throw up into that branch union without touching the dummy with your throw bag. But the guy just went flying through the tree and took a considerable hit bouncing around. So I think the points lost or fear from bumping the dummy with a throw bag is probably not justified. So what we'd see when somebody came in and did their evaluation, and it's kind of typical, but the guys would look for the really high point, like over here, maybe a little lower, and then they'd do all their work getting through the tree and put in a redirect and come down, and then they'd come over, and then they'd do a bit of a limb walk to get back up to where the victim is. And it was just a demonstration to me of how often we're kind of preconditioned to go for the high point and then do our work to get over there. Another observation, oftentimes guys would take 15 pounds of rope and put it on their back. They'd climb up to that point, and carry the rope with them through all of their work to get there. As soon as they got to the victim, then they'd drop that 15 pounds back out of the tree. So I'm up watching all of this, and I know I have a big advantage, but I had to chuckle a lot of times because I would be up there being the panicked victim and sounding like a fool and everything, and having a lot of fun with that. And a couple times guys would come up, just basically tell me to shut up, and I'd go, but I'm really scared, I'm really scared. And they'd say, well, just be quiet, while I'm going to do this rescue. And I'm thinking, okay, but in about 10 seconds, when you start taking me down on that line you're going to take me down on, the judge is going to say, climber, stop, come down out of the tree. That was kind of fun. But I always felt sorry for the guys because they just missed it. So I'll try to wrap this up because it's getting too long. But an observation, you're always supposed to have a line in the tree, but it doesn't seem like everybody does that. And the argument would be like the one with total abstinence or safe sex. I'm not going to get into that argument. So set your line. But if you don't set your line, be careful of the preconditioned training that you go into these situations with and what you might actually see in real life. And so, in summary, I think what really works well with things like this is learn how to set a line quickly from the tree or from the ground. And whether you do that with a cinched anchor or whether you do that with a basal anchor, there's some concepts there. So a couple of thoughts. You might think about when you set your line, try to set it as near the victim as you possibly can. I mean, that just seems to make sense. And take the end of the victim's, the line you're going to use to get the victim, take the end, not the whole rope, and set a sling near or just above the victim if you can. Don't be spring-loaded to always do what's practiced in aerial rescue. I mean, if you're not always setting a line, then either start setting the line and moving it around so it's always going to be near the victim, or learn how to be fast at setting a line without having to do a bunch of redirects and coming from a different part of the tree. One of the rules in aerial rescue is that the line has to be at least 15 feet away from the victim. But, in reality, that's just for practice. That's just for competitions. Try to get that line as close as you can to the victim. Another thing, you see a lot of guys that take a rope wrench up there with them on it for an SRT line for the victim's for retrieving the victim. And when you think about it, it's doubled moving rope is just a much better way to take a victim out of the tree. If you try to lift him up off of the limb or off of his system, you've got an instant 3-to-1 to do that. Or if you put another prusik above the prusik or a friction hitch above the friction hitch, then you've got an instant 5-to-1 to lift him out of his system. But if you've got that rope wrench on there, you've actually just added some hardware when it's not needed. And not only that, it gives you just a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage if you're trying to lift him off. Not only that, when you do get him to the ground, you always have to push down on the wrench to try to relieve all the friction. So that's just a few thoughts in trying to do some of this, and we can, hopefully there'll be some other good discussion about how this was done. But it was a great learning experience. I was just so honored to be able to be part of it and enjoyed every bit of it. So